Hello and welcome to Economics. This is Tanmay. Externalities is one of the four main market failures that we learned previously. In the last video, we learned about positive externalities, both production and consumption side. Similarly, now we learn about negative externalities, which is also known as spillover cost. In this session of Economics, we will learn about negative externalities, production and consumption side with an example followed by a graphical representation and analysis and what government's role and what action should government take. So let's get started. So the negative externalities can be from both sides, consumption and production. Further in this video, with the help of illustrations and graphical representation, we will learn how this causes market failure. Market failure is when the market fails to allocate resources at a socially optimum level and that results in loss of welfare. First, we will look at negative consumption externalities, how the consumption of certain goods and services harms and has negative effect on the group of people or society. Smoking can be an example for negative externalities or spillover cost. This is a cost spilled over by someone other than the original consumer, someone who is not involved in the transaction. Some people get sick through secondhand smoking, that is passive smoking. Smokers are a drain to the society. We have to pay for their health expenditure through our tax money and a lot of negative points associated with smoking. To the graphical representation, here is a small technique which will help you understand the curve movement in the graph better. Remember, there are two curves, benefit and cost. Benefit is the downward sloping curve and cost is the upward sloping curve. Okay, so now as we're looking into consumption, consumption is done by consumer. When we talk about consumption, the benefit curve moves. And production is done by the firms where we discuss about production. And the cost curve moves. With this in mind, now let's move on to the graphical representation. Y-axis here denotes cost and benefit. X-axis denotes the output. Marginal cost curve and marginal private cost curve are same here. Marginal private benefit curve denotes the benefit received by individual consuming cigarette. And the corresponding quantity consumed in the free market is Q star. Remember, here we are seeing negative consumption externalities. So, the benefit curve moves. Now, since the consumer only sees their profit and consumes it, and the consumption of cigarette causes loss of welfare in the society, the marginal social benefit curve moves towards left of the marginal private benefit curve. And the corresponding quantity consumed then is QS. Here, do you notice that the quantity consumed in the free market is more than the socially required quantity? So here are the few terms, few abbreviations that I described in the graphical representation. So from the graphical representation, we see that the marginal benefit is more than the marginal social benefit because the individual consuming derives more benefit and happiness out of it, but on the other hand, it is detrimental for the society. In unregulated market, without government acting on it, its quantity available for consumption is more than the socially accepted quantity. That is the reason why the market fails. And we know if cost is more than benefit, it is loss of social welfare. So once these kind of negative consumption externality is there in the market, the government has to act in to discourage its consumption. So what government does, it imposes taxes and government applies rules and penalties and fines to discourage its consumption. Negative production externalities occurs when the third party not involved in economic transaction is harmed for the external economic activities of production. That is, when somebody else is producing something but a society or a group of individuals is affected by it. There, the marginal social cost, that is the cost to individual or the society, is equal to marginal private cost plus marginal external cost. This can be costs like environmental cost, health costs, and so on. One of the example of negative production externality can be production of ban on single-use polybags. Government of India has decided to slowly phase out the production of polybags, thermocol plates and cutlery, wrapping films. These products are a threat not just to animal on land but aquatic species also. Production of such products have negative production externalities to the environment. Emission from plants and industries can also be harmful to the ecosystem. These industries not only cause air pollution but also untreated industrial waste that goes into water bodies are threat to human lives and aquatic lives also. The factories adopt cheaper and pocket-friendly measures to get rid of all their waste material, for which society and group of individuals have to pay a costlier price. Deforestation is also an example of negative production externalities. In order to expand the land area for construction of buildings, railway tracks, or just open space for a variety of other purposes, the natural habitat is lost for many human beings and animals. So, the negative externalities are mostly concerning the environment and natural resources depletion and degradation. The y-axis here denotes cost and benefit, and x-axis denotes output. Here, the marginal social benefit and marginal private benefit is the same. That is a downward sloping curve. The marginal private cost is the cost incurred by society producing goods which have negative side effect to the environment and society. The corresponding quantity produced is Q star. That is the quantity produced in the free market. Remember the technique? Since we are talking about negative production externality, the cost curve moves here, and the marginal cost curve moves to the left of marginal private cost. And now the corresponding quantity produced is QS. Here also, like earlier, the socially optimal production of output is less than what is produced in the free market. The graphical representation, we conclude that the society bears the cost of all environmental pollution by the factory. The factories don't adopt proper waste disposal methods, and this in turn harms the surrounding. The quantity produced in the free market by the factories is at Q star, and the quantity that is required to be produced for social welfare is QS, which is less than Q star. This is the reason for market failure. Hence, there is a welfare loss to the society if such goods are produced. So what does the government do in this case? The government intervenes and imposes fine and penalties if the discharge is not treated properly. Government sets up rules, protocols so that the natural habitat is not disturbed. All these regulations by the government discourages the producer for producing such goods, and this way the producer becomes responsible and sensitized about the surrounding and environment. This way we are reminded that nature should not be taken for granted, must be respected at all cost. These restrictions help in ecosystem restoration. So to summarize, the negative consumption externality is when somebody else's consumption affects someone who is not involved in transaction. Examples can be smoking, playing loud music, defective vehicles. Here the marginal private benefit is more than the marginal social benefit. The government intervenes by imposing taxes and duties. Negative production externality, on the other hand, is when production of commodity leads to spillover cost to the society. Examples can be smoke and pollutants from the industries, discharge untreated, polybag production by companies. Here, the marginal social cost is more than the marginal private cost. That is, the society bears more cost of such production. And how does the government work? The government intervenes by charging penalties and fines.